Smokey Robinson, a musical legend with a voice that could melt anyone's heart and eyes that spoke volumes, has long been admired as the epitome of romance and gentleness. But what if I told you there's more to his story than meets the eye? Do you really know who Smokey Robinson is? Brace yourself, because the truth behind this icon is anything but what you expect. Just to hold her in my arms one more time, one more time. This unforgettable line echoes through time, but the story behind it is far from simple. It's more than just lyrics, it's a complicated tale of love, loss, and secrets. You see, this wasn't the first time the melody played out. The truth, it unfolded long after Smokey had already said, "I do," to someone else. Yes, this affair came later, and it was far from just a passing moment. Behind that smooth voice, Smokey Robinson wasn't the man the world thought he was. Underneath the music lay a man grappling with addiction, hiding an affair with none other than Diana Ross, and carrying a secret. He was the father of a child who few knew existed. And if that wasn't enough, he was embroiled in a legal battle with his ex-wife that seemed impossible to escape. I was at that point, just walking around. I was 6 feet 1 inch, weighing only 120 pounds. I couldn't find pants that fit, so I had to use safety pins just to hold them up. Smokey wasn't just writing love songs for the world. He was a man falling apart in front of everyone. Surrounded by the loss of close friends, he fought not just for his life but for the very music that made him a legend. There came a moment when he knew he had to say goodbye. Not just to people, but to everything he had ever known and loved. As Smokey fought through his darkest moments, his past began to resurface, spilling out in courtrooms, interviews, and confessions he could no longer avoid. My youngest son was born, and I finally had to face her. And then she threw me out. There were no easy answers. Smokey didn't blame her. He understood, but for many women, a line had been crossed, one that couldn't be undone. At the time, he didn't realize how deep his struggles had run. He was still the man everyone adored, yet beneath the surface, he was wrestling with an overwhelming sense of hardship and loss. So, who was the real man behind that legendary voice? Before Smokey Robinson wrote the songs that captured the hearts of millions, he was just a skinny kid from Detroit, a city where survival was anything but guaranteed. Growing up in a cramped house with 11 people, cousins, relatives, all packed together without an ounce of privacy, was far from easy. In Detroit, if you could breathe, you could share a bed. The streets were unforgiving, filled with shattered dreams and lives consumed by heroin and despair. Yet Smokey, against all odds, wasn't born to be swallowed by the harshness of it all. He was born to write songs, to sing melodies that carried hope. By the age of 17, he had already written more than 100 songs, none of which had been recorded, but all of which lived on in his heart. The journey wasn't about chasing a record deal. It was about finding a way to survive, a way to rise above the struggles. And music, it was his only way out. Every note was a battle against hunger, a desperate plea for a better future. When Berry Gordy heard Shop Around, he didn't just hear a great voice, he saw a man who could change everything. Berry Gordy saw something special in Smokey Robinson, a secret weapon for Motown's success. In no time, Smokey became an icon, not just for his music, but for his charisma. With perfect hair, an infectious smile, and a voice that could stop anyone in their tracks, he became a role model for an entire generation of young black Americans. He married Claudette Rogers, the only woman in his life strong enough to challenge him. For a brief moment, Smokey seemed to have it all: hits that topped the charts, a beautiful wife, tailor-made suits, and dreams as big as the world itself. To the world, Smokey Robinson appeared untouchable, a legend in the making. But behind the glitz and glamour, things were beginning to unravel, and a new, tumultuous chapter of his life was about to unfold. Early years of Motown, Smokey and Diana Ross spent a lot of time together. Recording sessions, songwriting meetings, interviews, and rehearsals. These two rising stars worked side by side, building their careers in parallel. Both were signed by Berry Gordy and became the face of Motown. Professional bond was strong, but as time went on, the line between work and romance blurred. While Smokey was still married to Claudette Rogers, a deep emotional connection developed between him and Diana Ross. Smokey admits that the relationship grew unexpectedly during their time together, lasting much longer than he initially anticipated, even though he was already married. The seeds of their relationship were sown during the time Smokey officially joined Motown. While Claudette took a step back from her career to raise their family, Smokey's career continued to flourish. It was then that his connection with Diana Ross intensified. They were often seen together at Motown events, and photos of the two captured a closeness that was undeniable. Yet, the media kept silent, and no one spoke of the growing bond between them. though many within the company were suspicious. It wasn't until decades later that Smokey admitted to the emotional affair, revealing that letting go of it was harder than he had ever imagined. When the relationship ended, Smokey realized just how deep his feelings for Claudette still ran. He didn't want to hurt her any further, but by the time the public discovered the truth, it was too late. Claudette faced the pain in silence, as the media chose not to report her heartache. The affair became a shock to their already strained marriage, a marriage that had long been tested by distance, infidelity, and the pressures of fame. Photos from the late 1970s show Smokey attending events alone, while Claudette, once a constant companion, was nowhere to be found. The distance between them grew with each passing day. When asked about Diana Ross in interviews, Smokey was open about the brief but powerful affair. Although short-lived, he admitted that the relationship had a profound impact on him. However, Smokey never fully delved into how that affair influenced both his marriage and his music career. Yet, over time, the impact became clear. Smokey and Claudette's relationship continued to cool, and by the 1980s, their marriage had dissolved. Officially divorced in 1986, marking the end of a chapter filled with personal, musical, and legal struggle. Despite the brief nature of his relationship with Diana Ross, it left a lasting mark on Smokey. He admitted it openly, confirming that the affair, though fleeting, had changed everything. The emotional strain it created could never be erased. As the years passed, the cracks in his marriage became more apparent. They stopped performing together, stopped traveling together, and by the early 1980s, they were living separate lives. Then came the turning point that Claudette had warned about. "My youngest son was born," Smokey recalls. "I finally had to tell her the truth, and she kicked me out." Doesn't blame her. "I mean, you know, most women have their own boundaries, and that's where most women draw the line." At the time, Smokey Robinson was facing more challenges than he realized. While still touring and working tirelessly at Motown, he began another relationship, this time with a woman outside the music industry. The relationship resulted in the birth of a son. The child was born while Smokey was still legally married to Claudette. Years later, in a revealing interview, Smokey recalled the warning Claudette had given him when they first started their relationship: "Don't bring me disease, don't bring me children." Yet, when the truth came to light, Claudette couldn't handle it. The birth of the child marked the tipping point. Claudette had already endured years of long separations, emotional distance, and whispers from within the Motown circle. But this revelation shattered what little was left of their fragile bond. The cracks were too deep to fix. By 1986, they filed for divorce. The paperwork marked the end of a 27-year marriage, a relationship that had begun long before Smokey became famous. Together, they had 2 children and decades of shared music, but nothing could hold them together anymore. After the divorce, Claudette largely withdrew from the public eye, rarely giving interviews. When she did, it was almost always focused on music. Smokey, however, became more candid about his struggles, especially as he began to reflect on the toll fame had taken on his personal life. He didn't deny his mistakes and admitted that the events leading up to the divorce were a turning point, affecting every part of his life. The child from the extramarital affair never became a public figure, but his existence marked a permanent shift in Smokey's life. His family was no longer intact, his marriage was in ruins, and the personal fallout set the stage for even darker days ahead: addiction, a disappearance from the public eye, and what Smokey later described as the darkest years of his life. The divorce didn't just fracture Smokey's personal life, it disrupted the rhythm of his career. For the first time since Motown's early days, he wasn't recording regularly. His touring schedule slowed, songwriting halted, and he rarely showed up to meetings. When he did appear, he looked gaunt, worn down, and distant. It was the early 1980s, and Smokey Robinson's once polished image, known for its cool, controlled demeanor, was beginning to slip. On stage, his suits still fit, but off stage, they hung loosely on him. Weight dropped, his voice became thinner, and his eyes took on a hollow, sunken look. He later described himself as a walking corpse. Smokey admitted that at 5 feet 11 inches, he weighed only 120 pounds. His pants no longer fit, and he had to use safety pins to hold them up. "I got to that point just walking around," he recalled. His friends could see the change, though they didn't always speak up. Some assumed he was simply stressed, but others realized it was far more serious. For most of the 1960s and 1970s, Smokey Robinson managed to stay away from hard drugs. He stuck to marijuana and steered clear of the cocaine that was sweeping through the music industry. But after his divorce, everything changed. What started as a small habit soon escalated into a daily struggle. As his addiction deepened, recording sessions became less frequent, business meetings were missed, and his daily routine became unrecognizable. Smokey later confessed that he'd look in the mirror and not recognize the person staring back at him. The music was gone. The energy was gone. The longer the battle with addiction went on, the harder it became for him to break free. But then, something unexpected happened, an intervention from an unlikely source. A woman, a church pastor who didn't even know him, reached out. She told him she had been praying for him for over a year. Through her prayers, God had revealed to her that Smokey was on the brink, facing serious health problems, possibly even a stroke if he didn't stop using cocaine. She spoke to him about his struggles in ways that no one else could have known. "I don't know you," she said, "but a year ago in my prayer room, your name came out of my mouth." Smokey, taken aback, walked into her church. It was there that he made the decision to quit. He never entered a formal rehab program, and, incredibly, he never relapsed. For Smokey, that moment, a stranger's prayer and his own decision, marked the turning point that saved his life. His fall had been quiet, but his recovery was even quieter. Smokey disappeared from the spotlight, and for years, people believed he had walked away from music for good. However, Smokey wasn't gone. He was starting over. But just when it seemed he was emerging from the darkness, a legal battle brought his past back into the public eye. In 2014, years after their divorce, Claudette Robinson re-entered Smokey's life, not with a phone call or public reunion, but through a legal filing. Claudette sued Smokey for the rights to the songs he wrote during their marriage. The lawsuit wasn't just about royalties, it was about ownership. Claudette argued that, as Smokey's wife at the time, she was entitled to 50% of the rights to the songs he had written, citing California's community property laws. Smokey, on the other hand, countered by citing the Copyright Act of 1976, which allows artists to regain rights to songs they signed away earlier in their careers. Smokey filed for sole ownership, but Claudette disagreed, claiming that the songs were a shared creative effort, created during the years they were married. The case exposed more than just financial tensions. It revealed years of unresolved issues. Claudette's legal team accused Smokey of violating a 1989 settlement agreement, which required him to protect her financial interests in their shared work. They also accused him of fraud and breach of fiduciary duty, alleging that he acted both selfishly and illegally. Smokey's legal team fired back, arguing that the right to reclaim copyright belongs solely to the author of the work, not to an ex-spouse. They also claimed that Claudette's lawsuit threatened new business deals Smokey was pursuing with the reclaimed works. This legal battle sparked a larger question in the music industry. When an artist regains control of their work, do ex-spouses have the right to claim compensation for songs written during the marriage? To date, no final ruling has resolved the issue. The dispute over ownership between Smokey Robinson and Claudette opened up a broader conversation about his legacy. Who really shaped Smokey Robinson's career? Who should be remembered alongside him for the musical journey that changed the industry? This question first arose publicly in 1987 when Smokey was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as a solo artist, despite the immense contributions of the other members of the Miracles. At the induction ceremony in Cleveland, Smokey received music's highest honor, and the crowd cheered. Headlines focused on Smokey's unique voice, his legendary hits, and his profound influence on the next generation of R&B artists. But behind the applause, another question lingered. Where were the Miracles? The other members, Ronnie White, Pete Moore, Bobby Rogers, and Claudette Robinson, were missing from the spotlight. Weren't just backup singers, they were co-writers who helped shape the sound of Motown. Together, they created some of Motown's most iconic hits, including Shop Around, You've Really Got a Hold on Me, Mickey's Monkey, and Going to a Go-Go. The Miracles were also the first Motown group to appear on national television and the first to tour the segregated South under the Motown name. When the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inducted Smokey Robinson, it was only his name that was etched into history. The Miracles, the group that had helped propel him to stardom, were left out of the spotlight. There was no joint ceremony, no acknowledgement of the band's role in his success, no tribute to the people who had helped shape Motown's sound. Fans were outraged, feeling that this was nothing short of a betrayal. Music historians and critics were quick to point out the glaring oversight. They reminded the world that Smokey's solo career was made possible by the Miracles, who were there in the beginning, co-writing and recording timeless hits. For many, this solo induction felt incomplete. While the members of the Miracles didn't speak out publicly, their disappointment was deeply felt. Claudette Robinson, Smokey's ex-wife and the only female member of the group, took matters into her own hands and fought for recognition in court. Yet, once again, she and the rest of the Miracles found themselves erased from the narrative, this time by one of the most prestigious institutions in music. Smokey, for his part, never made a strong public statement about the omission. Some believed he had no control over the decision, while others thought he should have been more vocal in ensuring the band's contributions were acknowledged. Time passed, and the moment seemed to fade into history. But in 2012, the Hall of Fame made things right, albeit 24 years too late. Miracles were inducted, and this time, Smokey was there to witness his bandmates finally receive the recognition they deserved. "I've always felt that the Miracles should be inducted," Smokey said. "When they inducted me a second time, I was surprised. It was a great honor." The late induction of the Miracles was a significant moment in music history. It allowed for the acknowledgement of their essential contributions, and while Smokey was proud to see his group finally honored, for fans who remembered the first induction, the damage had already been done. The moment that should have been shared as a collective achievement had passed, leaving an irreplaceable void. By the time the group was inducted, many of the original members were no longer around to celebrate. The plaques were updated to honor their contributions, but the original lineup, intended to stand together in recognition, was incomplete. The loss was palpable, and Smokey felt it deeply. He had outlived most of his early bandmates, and with each passing year, their absence weighed heavily on him. One of the greatest losses Smokey experienced was the tragic death of his close friend, Marvin Gaye. The two weren't just colleagues, they were brothers in music. They spent nearly every day together in the early years of Motown, and Smokey was the one Marvin would call to share new songs late at night. When Marvin embarked on his groundbreaking project What's Going On, Smokey was one of the first to encourage him and believe in his vision. But in 1984, tragedy struck. Marvin was shot and killed by his own father, just one day before his 45th birthday. Smokey was devastated. The loss was more than just the passing of a friend, it was the loss of a musical spirit he had championed, and it left him reeling. But Marvin wasn't the first loss Smokey had to endure. Sam Cooke, a legend whose voice and career Smokey had always admired, was tragically murdered in 1964. At just 24 years old, Smokey was still finding his footing in the music industry when he lost one of his greatest influences. Sam Cooke had not only inspired Smokey's music but also the way he carried himself in the industry, holding firm to his principles and protecting his career. The shock of Sam's untimely death stayed with Smokey for years. It was a tragedy that shaped him and became a haunting memory. And in 1988, he faced another painful loss. The death of Arthur Franklin's brother, Seal Franklin, who had been a constant presence in his life. Seal was more than just a musical director. He was a longtime friend who had stood by Smokey through thick and thin. With his passing, another part of Smokey's world slipped away. When Arthur passed away in 2018, Smokey was there to deliver a heartfelt eulogy at her funeral. Standing before world leaders and fans alike, he spoke with the kind of raw emotion that reminded everyone of the humble beginnings they shared on the porches of Detroit, singing together as kids. As Smokey entered his 80s, he continued to perform, but the once bustling dressing rooms were now quieter, the voices of his lifelong friends missing from the mix. The original members of the Miracles, the ones who had been there with Smokey from the very beginning, slowly passed away. Bobby Rogers, whose harmony and stage presence were legendary, died in 2013. 4 years later, Pete Moore, the group's bassist and vocal arranger, followed. With each loss, Smokey became one of the last surviving vocalists of that golden era of Motown. As the years went on, Smokey's dressing room became eerily still, a stark contrast to the vibrant chaos of the past. Memorial services became regular events, but the music never stopped. Despite the emptiness of the room, Smokey still stood strong, performing his heart out, but his closest friends were no longer by his side. Then, in 2020, the world faced an unprecedented challenge. The COVID-19 pandemic hit, and Smokey found himself facing yet another battle. Though he had overcome so much in his life, the pandemic became a personal test like no other. In the midst of the global crisis, Smokey contracted the virus. At first, it felt like just another cold, fatigue set in, but soon, his breathing grew labored. His oxygen levels plummeted, and he was rushed to the hospital, isolated from his family and friends. The man with the unmistakable voice, the one who had serenaded the world for decades, could now barely speak above a whisper. In interviews after his recovery, Smokey shared the real fear that consumed him. It wasn't death that frightened him, it was the thought of losing his voice forever. His voice had always been his identity, his lifeline. When he thought he was at death's door, he feared that this, his gift to the world, would be gone. Against all odds, Smokey made a miraculous recovery. His strength, built through a lifetime of hardship and loss, helped him conquer this challenge, fueled by his enduring love for music. Despite his struggles, music was his anchor, and he never abandoned it. Smokey continued to write, record, and perform, his voice a testament to his resilience. His journey is a powerful example of faith, strength, and an unyielding love for music. His timeless songs continue to inspire and resonate with generations around the world. Smokey Robinson is not just a music legend, he's a symbol of hope and endurance. Thank you for watching. If you've been inspired by Smokey's story, like, share, and subscribe for more uplifting tales. See you soon.